What if the most exacting examination of a human life doesn't unfold in a classroom, a therapist's office, or beneath the applause of those who love you, but in the unlit hours when your only companion is your breath? What if the crisis you thought you were merely surviving was, in truth, a secret doorway into an invisible initiation? An ordeal so quiet most people never name it, yet so rigorous it reconfigures consciousness at the root. Carl Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." If that is true, perhaps what happened to you was not failure, but a rite too subtle to celebrate, too sacred to broadcast. Have you ever experienced a quiet turning point in your life? Comment 1 if you've ever gone through something that felt like a breakdown, but later revealed itself as transformation. Comment 2 if you're still wondering whether your hardest moments held a hidden purpose. I have tracked these invisible initiations, the kind that leave no scar on the skin, yet alter the field around a person, the cadence of their movement, the gravity of their presence. Some souls, it seems, cross the threshold of individuation through a corridor of profound, scarless suffering. You may already have walked that corridor without realizing it. The proof is not a dramatic story, but a new texture of nervous system, an ease with uncertainty, a wordless recognition exchanged with those who have met the same interior weather. If there is such a test, the question is no longer "Am I worthy?" but "Can I perceive what has already begun?" Passing it does not make you special. It makes you honest. It does not pull you out of life. It binds you to life's actual pulse. And from that pulse, a second birth sometimes arrives. Soundless, luminous, unmistakable. The room doesn't change, but you do. The calendar doesn't change, but time feels different. The face in the mirror is the same, yet your eyes, clearer, steadier, belong to someone who has gone down into the dark and returned with light that will not flicker. There is a kind of birth that doesn't scream. It arrives in the pauses, between words, after storms, in the soft click when what you kept chasing dissolves, and what you already are steps forward. Jung understood this as a decisive turn in individuation, the moment when the ego loosens its white-knuckle grip on becoming and begins to serve the self, the archetype of wholeness that has been whispering from the beginning. You don't earn this crossing. You recognize it. The question shifts from, "Am I worthy of transformation?" to, "Can I admit that transformation is already underway?" This second birth reorganizes the economy of your psyche. Where once resilience meant bracing, now it means bending without breaking, flexible strength rather than brittle endurance. In Jungian terms, libido, psychic energy, reorients, away from persona maintenance and toward deeper integration. Why? Stop metabolizing life through approval metrics and begin metabolizing difficulty itself, turning poison into medicine, chaos into clarity. Alchemical imagery fits. The nigredo, blackening of collapse, yields the albedo, whitening of insight, and, eventually, the rubedo, reddening of embodied vitality. You are not escaping the world. You are digesting it better. What does this look like on the ground? Sign 1. Solitude becomes sanctuary. There comes a day when the room goes quiet, and, to your surprise, the quiet doesn't swallow you. It holds you. This is the first unmistakable sign. Your relationship with aloneness has been transfigured. What used to feel like exile now feels like sanctuary, spacious, alive, creative. The old abandonment complex that once scattered your energy in pursuit of approval, attention, or constant connection loosens its grip. You no longer hemorrhage vitality, trying to prove your worth to others, or to yourself. And in the sudden economy of that recovered energy, a distinct stillness emerges. Not withdrawal, not depression, but the calm of a self no longer auditioning. Jung would call this a shift in the axis around which you live. Your persona, the mask designed to secure belonging, stops dictating the script. The psyche reorients toward the self, and with it, your solitude changes valence. You are no longer alone from others. You are alone with yourself. This difference is everything. In that interior companionship, active imagination awakens. Images, symbols, and intuitions begin to move toward you from the depths. You don't have to chase insights. They arrive like visitors who finally find the door unlocked. Practically, you notice that free evenings no longer demand emergency plans to fill them. You can sit without the twitch to scroll, text, or schedule. Silence becomes a medium rather than a malfunction. In it, subtle perceptions sharpen. Where your energy leaks, where you say yes while your body says no, where the nervous system spikes because an old script got triggered. You start to prefer rooms where you can hear your own soul over rooms where you can barely hear yourself think. This is not misanthropy. In fact, paradoxically, the less you flee your own company, the more attractive your presence becomes. People feel the resonance of someone grounded in themselves. They sense the absence of neediness and the presence of authenticity. You stop resenting others for not filling your emptiness, because emptiness has turned into open space. Fertile, not hungry. From that space, creativity shifts from compensatory display, see me, to communion. Let life move through me. The notebook fills, the studio light stays on. Even your walks feel like collaborations with the day. You also develop a taste for thresholds, the liminal margins where an old self dissolves and a new one forms. Mystery no longer terrifies. It intrigues. You find yourself leaning into the unknown, the way a surfer leans into a wave. Alert, supple, delighted to meet what exceeds control. Has your relationship with the unknown shifted over time? Comment 1. If you now meet uncertainty with curiosity instead of fear. Comment 2. If you still find yourself resisting the mystery when it arrives. Jung said the individuation process requires withdrawal into oneself, not as escape, but as descent to the wellspring. This now is your practice. Solitude is no longer a vacuum. It is a chapel. And from this chapel, you will meet the next sign, the brave, clarifying work of turning toward the shadow, without flinching. Sign 2. You turn toward the shadow and find power, not proof. There's a moment when your honesty sharpens enough to cut through your favorite alibis. You stop auditioning for the part of good and start practicing being whole. This is the second sign. Your relationship with the shadow has transformed from fear and avoidance to integration and strength. You can name your capacities for manipulation, power hunger, envy, and the urge to wound, not to shame yourself, but to shepherd these forces into conscious service. Jung warned that what we refuse to own in ourselves, we meet as fate outside ourselves. Owning it changes the weather. The very impulses you once exiled, rage, jealousy, dominance, reveal themselves as raw, primordial energies. Like electricity, they're dangerous when unattended and miraculous when properly wired. Anger, especially, becomes a sacred fire. You no longer set the whole house ablaze to spotlight your pain. You build a hearth and let the flame burn only what must end. Misaligned relationships, self-betraying habits, stale agreements with who you used to be. Here, the psyche's transcendent function begins to hum. You learn to hold paradox rather than force resolution. You can be tender and formidable, disciplined and merciful, soft-spoken and unbending where it counts. That dynamic tension generates real growth, the kind that doesn't wobble when life shakes the table. Emotional processing shifts as well. Feelings still arrive in weather systems, but they no longer destabilize you for long. Why? Because you've built a larger container. Your interior has walls now, porous enough for air and light, sturdy enough to keep the storm from scouring the furniture. Practically, this looks like pausing when the old trigger is pulled, naming precisely what is happening, and choosing your response with the cool authority of someone who has read the terrain before. Instead of weaponizing silence, You use it to listen for the deeper signal beneath the static. Instead of collapsing into guilt, you metabolize it into responsibility. Instead of projecting your unloved parts onto someone else, you welcome them home for retraining. The drama that once felt irresistible starts to look like a trap you'd rather not revisit. You can watch triangulations and manipulations with the detachment of a field researcher, curious, compassionate, unhooked. This is not moral perfection. It is energetic integrity, palpable, even when you say nothing. People feel the shift. They may accuse you of being intense or different, because you are. You're less convenient to others' unconscious needs and more faithful to the truth. The prize isn't applause, it's agency. You're no longer possessed by your shadow, you're partnered with it. And that partnership frees enough bandwidth to recognize the next maturation. Immunity to projection. Not as aloofness, but as lucid compassion. Sign 3. Immunity to projection. There comes a day when someone hurls a story at you, and you feel it fly past without lodging in your chest. Not because you're numb, but because something essential has clarified. Projection is understood for what it is. Someone else depositing unprocessed material onto your canvas. This is the third sign. You no longer mistake other people's weather for your climate. Jung considered projection a primary mechanism by which the unconscious reveals itself. What we cannot accept inside, we encounter outside. Haloed as ideal, demonized as threat, romanticized as salvation. When you begin to individuate, you don't stop seeing projections. You start seeing through them. Recognition arrives without superiority. You register the transfer like a clinician noting data. Ah, this panic isn't mine. This sudden pedestal is dangerous. This contempt smells like their history, not my essence. Calm replaces compulsion, the transcendent function, the psyche's capacity to hold opposites without collapsing into either, activates here as altitude. You can rise above dualistic skirmishes long enough to perceive the larger pattern at play. A coworker reenacting an old parental drama. A partner recruiting you into a triangle you didn't audition for. A friend needing a mirror while confusing you for a mop. Formerly irresistible dramas lose their gravitational pull. You step back, not out of coldness, but in reverence for the sacred boundary where your responsibility ends and another's lesson begins. This shift matures compassion. You stop rescuing as a way to regulate your anxiety and start offering presence without self-abandonment. It sounds like, I'm here, and I trust you to navigate this. It looks like declining the invitation to absorb consequences that don't belong to you. Some will misread this as indifference. It isn't. It's energetic hygiene. You're protecting the inner altar from becoming a public thoroughfare. Practically, you notice 3 new reflexes. First, you pause to sift. Which part of this belongs to me? Second, you reality check with your body. Does your breath shorten, your stomach knot, your shoulders rise? If your system stays steady, you refrain from adopting the problem as your own. Third, you respond from clarity rather than counter-projection. If feedback lands, you metabolize it. If it doesn't, you let it pass without theatrics. Praise and blame become information, not verdicts. The payoff is enormous. Energy conserved, dignity intact, relationships cleaner. You can stay close without entangling, love without fusing, support without swallowing. The self's quiet authority radiates as a felt boundary, soft to the touch, firm at the edge. With this immune system online, your attention is freed for a deeper reorientation that often follows. Your very sense of time begins to change, and intuition, once a whisper, steps forward as a steady voice. Sign 4. Time reorients. Intuition takes the wheel. There's a shift you can feel in your bones. Time stops nipping at your heels and becomes a room you inhabit. Urgency thins. You move from clock time to kairos, right time. In Jungian terms, libido reorients toward the self. You're less driven by persona deadlines and more guided by inner timing. Intuition, once a backup singer, becomes led. It doesn't shout. It places a clear note in your chest. You learn to sort signals. The ego's urgent itch versus the self's quiet directive. Synchronicities cluster, not as superstition, but as meaningful patterning. Jung's a causal connecting principle. You start reading invisible layers, motives, trajectories, likely outcomes, through refined sensitivity rather than cynicism. Practically, decisions simplify. Fewer pro-con spreadsheets, more precise yes-no from the body. You consult an inner counsel, ancestral wisdom, dreams, active imagination, and then act without fanfare. Listening deepens between the words, the pauses, micro-tensions, what a room does to your breath. You hear the soul beneath the persona. Because time feels inhabited, patience returns. You can wait without withering. Projects land when they're ripe, not when fear demands closure. Have you noticed a change in your inner sense of timing? Comment 1 if you've started trusting your intuition over urgency. Comment 2 if deadlines and expectations still dominate your decisions. Meetings shorten. Detours reveal the road. What once felt like delay now feels like choreography. This isn't anti-reason. It's reason partnered with a larger intelligence. The transcendent function holds analysis and intuition in a productive tension. Left and right hand playing the same song. And as you trust this new tempo, your energy stops leaking into false urgency. The day breathes again. You do too. Sign 5. You live the death-rebirth cycle. You stop dreading endings. Dissolution no longer reads as "I'm failing," but as "something new needs room." In Jung's alchemical map, the psyche must pass through nigredo, darkening, before albedo, clarification, and rubedo, embodiment. You feel this in real time. The day a role, belief, or bond crumbles, a clearer current begins to move underneath. Uncertainty becomes an active practice. You notice that meaning often arrives between decision and result. The transcendent function holding opposites until a third thing emerges. Instead of forcing closure, you tend the kiln. Sleep, journaling, walks, honest conversations. The answer grows like a root system before it appears as a leaf. Energetically, you get economical. You invest where alignment is high and leakage is low. Fewer performative obligations, fewer because I should commitments. This is not withdrawal. It's stewardship of libido, psychic energy. You protect the creative fire from being drafted into image management. Growth reveals itself as a spiral, not a straight line. Old themes revisit, abandonment, control, worth, but at deeper altitudes. You stop shaming the recurrence and start harvesting the new layer of insight it brings. Patience increases because you can see the pattern. Descent, metabolize, reassemble, reemerge. Creativity shifts from proving to communing. You're not making to be seen. You're making to be in touch, with life force, with the self. The work may look simpler outside, but it's denser inside, like honey. Feedback, praise or critique, becomes information, not oxygen. This is the sign. Endings feel like thresholds, not cliffs. You don't cling to the doorframe or sprint through. You bow, breathe, and step when the timing ripens. And each time you do, the center holds a little more. Sign 6. External validation loses its throne. One day, you realize comparison tastes stale. The old inferiority itch doesn't bite. The superiority sugar rush doesn't land. This is the 6th sign. The economy of your worth has been nationalized, brought back under inner governance. In Jungian terms, the persona, the mask built for approval and belonging, no longer monopolizes your psychic energy. Authority migrates inward toward the self, and the nervous system stops chasing applause like oxygen. Practically, this looks unglamorous and profound. You publish the work without stalking reactions. You speak a boundary without rehearsing 15 justifications. You listen to critique as information instead of a verdict. You receive praise the same way. When feedback fits, you integrate it. When it doesn't, you let it pass without launching a courtroom drama in your head. The day's weather, likes, frowns, silence, no longer dictates your climate. Jung framed individuation as a recentering around the self, the ordering principle of the whole. From that center, self-worth stabilizes. You feel a grounded self-possession in the body. Feet heavy in a good way, breath lower, gaze steadier. The fidget to manage impressions calms, because you're no longer negotiating your right to be here. Image maintenance gives back its stolen hours. Libido, psychic energy, re-enters creative circulation. Authenticity becomes non-negotiable. You'd rather be rejected for truth than accepted for performance. Not out of defiance, but fidelity. You stop shape-shifting to keep the peace and start telling the truth to make peace. First inside, then outside. Some will call this selfish. It isn't. It's sobriety about what your life is for. A curious side effect follows. Belonging deepens. The less you audition, the more you meet people who aren't casting. Relationships clarify around resonance rather than role. You trust your taste for environments where your soul breathes and withdraw, quietly, cleanly, from stages that pay well in approval but cost you yourself. This is not asceticism. It's alignment. The transcendent function is at work, holding the tension between social reality and inner truth until a third thing emerges: relational life that honors both. And because your worth is sourced, not outsourced, courage becomes affordable. You can risk, create, and course-correct without melting, which sets the stage for the next refinement: guarding your life force with wise discrimination. Energetic sovereignty. Sign 7. Energetic sovereignty. You begin treating your life force like sacred capital, not with paranoia, but with clarity. This is the 7th sign: refined discrimination in where your energy goes and why. In Jungian language, libido, psychic energy, has been repatriated from persona maintenance and shadow-driven entanglements back to the self. The result is sovereignty. You choose, rather than get chosen by every loud invitation. Practically, it's subtle and unmistakable. You sense, almost immediately, which rooms oxygenate you and which siphon you. You catch micro-leaks, over-explaining, rescuing, doom-scrolling, and seal them without drama. Guilt around limits dissolves because you now recognize a limit for what it is, a shape that allows essence to hold. You say no earlier with less friction. You say yes with your whole body, not just your calendar. This isn't elitism. It's reverence for the sacredness of life force. Jung framed psychological maturity as power over oneself, not power over others. From that inner authority, you don't need to dominate a room. Your coherence changes the room. Presence becomes selective and therefore precious. People feel it, a grounded field that neither grabs nor performs. Some will misread it as coldness, because you're no longer available for unconscious contracts. It's not cold, it's clean. Your relationship with suffering also evolves. Pain stops being the enemy and becomes a teacher you consult. You don't seek hardship, but when it arrives, as it does in every honest life, you extract wisdom instead of debt. You metabolize what is unavoidable and decline what is unnecessary. The old pattern of chasing growth through constant crisis gives way to growth through steady integration. Discernment becomes embodied. Before committing, you check 3 dials. 1. Alignment. Does this serve the deeper arc of my values and vocation? 2. Reciprocity. Is there mutual nourishment, or am I fueling a one-way drain? 3. Timing. Is this ripe now, or will waiting increase truth and decrease friction? If 2 out of 3 are off, you bless and pass. The result is an energetic portfolio that's diversified but coherent. Boundaries stop being fences and become membranes, firm at the edge, permeable to what's life-giving. You allow others their lessons without absorbing their consequences. You can witness meltdown without melting, hold space without becoming the container. This is compassion with a backbone. The paradox? The more selectively you invest, the more generous you become. Because the well is tended, you can pour without resentment. Because the center holds, you can risk without collapse. Sovereignty doesn't isolate you. It situates you, precisely, humanly, inside a web of commitments worthy of your one wild current of energy. And from here, a stillness gathers, a quiet gravity that signals you've crossed a threshold. The psyche is reorganized. Hope matures into practiced faith. The next movement is the synthesis, the still center from which a second life proceeds. Something has changed. You're no longer seeking transformation. You are transformation. A stillness lives in you now, not passivity, but profound presence. Hope has matured into faith. Trust has shifted from outcomes to your capacity to meet them. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And you, quietly, powerfully, are living this. This second psychological birth is not a destination. It is a beginning, a reclamation, a remembrance of the self that was always waiting beneath the noise. You carry no certificate. No one crowned you. But if these signs resonate, something profound has occurred within you. You have passed through an initiation few will ever understand. Not because it is rare, but because it is silent. And now, you walk differently. You speak less to be heard and more to connect. You create not to prove, but to express. You no longer live from reaction, but from essence. This is individuation. This is sacred maturity. This is the invisible initiation. As Jung said, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. So look inside. Recognize what has already awakened, and know that the journey is not over. It has only just begun. Your transformation serves not just you, but the world. You are not broken. You are becoming. You are not lost. You are returning. You are not late. You are right on time. Walk on. Do you feel like your life is unfolding as it should? Comment 1 if you feel aligned with your inner path, even when others can't see it. Comment 2 if you still question whether you're behind or missing something.